In 1963, a Soviet radio engineer named Felix Gromov documented a voice on frequency 77.3 megahertz. The frequency had been designated as a dead zone, a buffer strip between military transmission bands, deliberately unoccupied, technically empty by administrative design. No licensed transmitter existed within 1,000 kilometers capable of broadcasting on that frequency. The signal was clear. The voice was reading a list of names. Gromov filed a technical anomaly report. The report was received by the State Committee on Radio Frequencies, flagged as requiring investigation, and within 72 hours reclassified at a level that removed it from the standard anomaly registry. What replaced it, in the portion of the registry I can access, is a single notation. Frequency 77.3. Activity logged, referred to Specialized Division. No further public record. The Specialized Division opened a file. That file is what I'm reading. I found it the way I find most things, by looking for something else. I was tracing the administrative history of Soviet radio jamming operations in the 1960s, specifically the frequency management decisions that created buffer zones around military bands. Beacon 77 appeared as a cross-reference in the frequency allocation records, a notation that 77.3 megahertz had been the subject of a specialized investigation, with a reference number that led to a classification level I had not previously cleared. The clearance came through last month. The file was waiting. I want to be clear that nothing in my search was personal. I was not looking for voices. I was not looking for this program. I was mapping bureaucratic frequency management in a decade I know well, doing the work I do and the work led here. What I found inside is not mine. It belongs to the voices themselves, and to the people whose names appear in the transcriptions, and to the engineer who spent 8 years listening to a frequency that had been declared empty, and who died on the date the frequency announced. In those days, the Soviet state monitored every frequency, every transmission, every word spoken over the airwaves. Nothing was private. Nothing was hidden. Today, you have a choice. NordVPN encrypts your internet traffic and keeps your identity hidden from prying eyes, whether it's your government, your internet provider, or anyone else watching. If you want to protect yourself online, check the link in the pinned comment for an exclusive deal. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what the file contains, in order, because the order matters. The Beacon 77 program was established in January 1964, 4 months after Gromov's initial anomaly report. Its founding documentation is brief. 2 pages authorizing ongoing technical monitoring of frequency 77.3 megahertz, with a mandate to document all the signal activity and report to a division whose full designation is redacted in the version I have access to. The scientific framing is minimal. Atmospheric radio propagation anomalies, unknown origin, technical characterization required. The framing is a placeholder. The program's personnel knew from its first week what they were dealing with, because what they were dealing with was already speaking to them. Gromov was appointed chief engineer. He was 34 years old, a signals specialist with a background in atmospheric radio propagation, which is why he was chosen, because the official framing required an expert in exactly that phenomenon. His technical journals from the program's 8 years of operation are in the file. They are the most important documents in the archive. They are the record of a man who spent 8 years building a precise and meticulous documentation of something that should not exist, with the specific discipline of an engineer who understands that the value of the record depends entirely on its accuracy, and who maintained that accuracy under conditions that, by the end, were personal. His journal from the first week of the program, January 1964, reads, Gromov's journal begins with a statement of technical precision. He wanted no room for dispute.
I want to establish at the outset the technical parameters of what I have been observing, because I anticipate this journal being read by people who will want to dispute the findings on technical grounds. And I want those grounds to be as narrow as possible when that dispute occurs. Frequency 77.3 MHz, designated dead zone in the National Frequency Allocation Registry, last reviewed and confirmed unoccupied in December 1962. My initial detection on September 19, 1963 was at 23:14 local time. Duration 11 minutes and 40 seconds. Signal strength sufficient for full intelligibility. No static. No modulation artifacts consistent with long-distance propagation. I have run the standard atmospheric skip propagation analysis 4 times. Skip propagation at this frequency, under the atmospheric conditions present on September 19th, cannot account for a signal of this clarity from any known transmitter in the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, or, at the outer bounds of plausibility, anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. What I heard was local. What I heard was on a frequency that nothing local is permitted to use. What I heard was a voice reading names. I am going to document everything. I'm going to document it with the precision I would bring to any technical investigation. I'm going to resist the temptation to interpret, because interpretation is premature until the characterization is complete. I'm beginning this journal because characterization requires a record.
He documented everything. For 8 years, every transmission, every name, every date, every fragment of speech that the voice produced on the frequency that administrative decision had declared empty. The journal runs to 6 volumes. I have been reading it for 3 weeks. The program logged 847 transmissions across 8 years, not 847 hours, 847 separate transmission events, each logged with time, duration, signal strength, and full transcription of content. The transmissions were not regular. They did not follow a schedule. They occurred at intervals that Gromov spent considerable effort trying to pattern and ultimately described in his 4th journal volume as,
the transmissions do not follow a human schedule. They follow something else. I cannot determine what.
The voice was consistent, not identical across 8 years. It aged slightly, in a way that Gromov described and that the program's consulting linguist later analyzed in detail, but consistent in the way that a person's voice is consistent, recognizable, individual, carrying the specific acoustic signature of a particular human throat. Gromov wrote in his 2nd volume,
I have now heard this voice 231 times. I know it the way you know the voice of someone you have worked with for years. I do not know who it is. I have never met anyone who sounds like this. But I know the voice.
The program spent its first year trying to locate the source. Standard signals intelligence procedure, triangulation, atmospheric modeling, transmitter power calculations. Gromov ran all of it. He ran it again in year 2 when new instruments came online. He ran a final comprehensive analysis in year 4, using techniques that had not been available at the program's start. The analysis produced the same result each time. No transmitter. Not an unidentified transmitter. The absence of any transmitter consistent with the signal's characteristics. The power levels were wrong for long-range propagation. The clarity was wrong for reflected or scattered signals. The signal behaved as though its source was local, within a few kilometers of the receiving station. There was nothing local. There was nothing within 1,000 kilometers. There was nothing the physics of radio transmission could account for. Gromov's notation after the final analysis, from his 4th journal volume:
I am going to stop looking for the transmitter. The transmitter is not the question. The question is what is being transmitted.
He was right. What was being transmitted was more important than where it came from, and the where was, in any case, inaccessible to the tools available to him. He turned his precision from the source to the content, and the content was names and dates, and the dates were coming true. His journal entry from October 1966, the program's 3rd year, when the verification archive had grown large enough to establish statistical patterns, is the moment where his precision confronts something precision cannot contain.
I want to record the following calculation, because I need it to exist somewhere outside my own head. Of the 93 names transmitted in the 3rd year of this program, for which I have been able to establish real-world matches, 71 have associated dates. Of those 71, 54 have dates that have now passed. Of those 54, 49 of the individuals died on or within 3 days of the date transmitted. 4 died within the same month. 1 died in the same year, but a different month. 0 have not died at all among those for whom the date has passed. I want to be clear about what this means statistically. The probability of this pattern arising by chance in a data set of this size is not calculable in any framework I have access to, because the prior probability of a radio transmission containing names and future death dates is itself not a quantity any statistical framework has a category for. I am not interpreting. I am noting that the numbers are what they are, that I have checked them, and that if I were analyzing any other data set with this pattern, I would say without hesitation that the relationship between the transmitted dates and the actual deaths is not coincidental. I will not use the word I would use for any other data set. I will say, the transmission is not random. The transmission is accurate. I do not know what to do with this, so I am going to keep doing the only thing I know how to do, which is document it.
The only thing he knew how to do. He documented it for 4 more years, until the transmission documented him. The State Committee on Radio Frequencies maintains a technical activity log for every designated frequency band. The log for frequency 77.3 megahertz for the period 1963 to 1971 shows 0 detected transmissions. The frequency is clean across the entire period. No activity, no anomalies, no departures from the designated empty status. The Beacon 77 program's internal transmission log, maintained by Gromov and his team with instruments specifically calibrated for this frequency, documents 847 transmissions across the same period. 8 years of documented signal activity on a frequency that the official log says was silent. 2 records of the same frequency across the same 8 years, maintained by different personnel with different instruments, producing incompatible pictures. The official log was not falsified. It reflects what the standard instruments detected, and standard instruments in that period were not calibrated to detect what the Beacon 77 team was hearing. The signal existed below the sensitivity threshold of routine monitoring equipment. It was not hidden from the official record. It simply did not appear there, because no instrument assigned to routine monitoring was tuned to find it. The program was the only thing listening. For 8 years, it was the only thing that could hear. Now I need to tell you what it heard. I thought Beacon 77 was a signals intelligence program that had encountered unusual atmospheric propagation, a technical phenomenon that mimicked speech the way pareidolia mimics faces. The human brain is very good at finding patterns in noise, and radio engineers are not immune to this. I assumed the program was the record of a serious technical error, carefully documented by careful people who had mistaken natural radio phenomena for something structured. I was wrong about the nature of the signal. I was wrong about what it contained. The error is not in the documentation. The error is in any framing that assumes what the documentation describes is explicable. Here is what the frequency was transmitting. The transcription of the September 19, 1963 transmission, Gromov's first detection, the one that generated the anomaly report, contains 17 names. Full names, in Russian, read at even intervals with brief pauses between them. No context, no framing, no explanation. 17 names, and then silence. Gromov identified none of them. He ran the names through available personnel directories and found partial matches. Common Russian surnames with common first names, the kind of names that belong to many people simultaneously. He could not determine which individuals, if any, the transmission was referring to. He logged the names and moved on. The program maintained the transmission records for 8 years. After the program closed, the records were archived. In 1989, 18 years after the program's end, a researcher conducting a review of classified signal intelligence files compared the 17 names from the September 1963 transmission against death records from the subsequent decade. 14 of the 17 names matched individuals who died between 1963 and 1971. The matches included not just names, but dates. The transmission had not only named the individuals, but had listed dates beside each name, and in 11 of the 14 verified matches, the date beside the name matched the individual's date of death. The frequency had read a list of names and dates in September 1963. The people were alive in September 1963. The dates were in the future. By 1971, 11 of them had died on the dates the voice had specified. I want to read you a section of one of the transmissions from the program's middle years. Not the first transmission, not the last, but one from 1967, 4 years in, when the program had established its documentation protocols and Gromov was recording with the precision that characterizes the bulk of the archive. The transcription format by this point had been standardized. Each name on a separate line, dates in the standard Soviet format, any fragmentary speech noted in brackets. The transmission of March the 7th, 1967 reads,
Static, approximately 4 seconds. Then voice, clear. Belov, Andrei Nikolaevich, 17th of August. Fomina Yekaterina Semyonovna, 3rd of November. Gusev, Pavel Ilyich. Gusev, Pavel Ilyich. Name repeated. Pause longer than standard between names. Zhukova, Natalia Vladimirovna, 22nd of February. Pause, approximately 8 seconds. Korolenko, no first name or patronymic. No date. Litvinov Dmitry Arkadyevich, 14th of March. Voice quality change. Lower, briefly, then returning to baseline. There is a door that opens from only one side. I am on the side that opens. Silence. Transmission ends.
There is a door that opens from only one side. I am on the side that opens. In the middle of a list of names and dates, the voice said this. Not every transmission contained these interpolated phrases. The majority were pure lists, names and dates without elaboration. But across 8 years, 43 transmissions contained fragments of speech that were not names, not dates, not list entries. Fragments that addressed directly or indirectly the act of transmission itself. Gromov documented them all. He noted them in his journals. He did not interpret them. He maintained his engineer's discipline across all 8 years and 43 anomalous fragments, logging each one with the same precision as the names and dates, refusing to draw conclusions he could not support technically. The linguist who analyzed the transmissions was Dr. Marina Savelyeva, 46 years old, from the Institute of Linguistics in Moscow. She was brought in during the program's 3rd year, after the pattern of names and dates had been established, and the program's supervisors needed a professional assessment of the linguistic content. Her analysis runs to 80 pages. Her testimony before the program's review commission, summarized in the commission's minutes and partially transcribed in the file, contains the passage I find most important.
I want to address what I consider the most significant finding of my analysis, which is not the content of the transmissions, but the temporal structure of the language in them. Russian, like all natural languages, encodes tense, past, present, future, in its verbal morphology. The transmissions I have analyzed use tense in a way that is internally consistent but externally anomalous. The names and dates are spoken in what I can only describe as a completed action tense, not future, not present, but the specific grammatical form used in Russian to describe something that has happened and is finished, something whose outcome is not in question. The names are spoken the way you would speak of people who have already died, even when, as I have verified against available records, the individuals named were alive at the time of transmission. The voice is not predicting, the voice is reporting. It is using the tense of completed fact for events that have not yet occurred. I do not have a linguistic framework for this. What I have is a precise technical observation. The grammar is consistent, the tense is intentional, and whoever or whatever is speaking treats the deaths it describes as already accomplished, as already in the past. I am filing this as a finding, not a conclusion. I do not know what it means. I know what the grammar says.
The voice treats the deaths as already accomplished, already in the past. Speaking from somewhere that the outcomes are not in question, the way a person speaks of history, the way you say died rather than will die, because from where you stand the question has already been answered. Here's the second contradiction. The program maintained a running verification archive, a document tracking which names from transmissions had been matched to real individuals, and whether the associated dates had proven accurate. The archive was maintained by Gromov personally, with the same precision as everything else he did. The verification archive shows a match rate that climbed across 8 years. In the first year, matches were partial and dates were unverified. By the 3rd year, the match rate for names was above 60%, and date accuracy for verified matches was above 70%. By the 6th year, both figures were above 85%. The program was not getting better at identifying the transmission subjects. The transmission was getting better at being specific, as though, over 8 years of being listened to, the voice was adjusting its descriptions to make the matches easier, as though it knew it was being heard and was accommodating the people hearing it. Gromov noted this in his 6th journal volume.
The signal is not improving because our instruments are improving. I have checked this. Our instruments have not changed. The signal is providing more identifying information per name than it did in year 1. It is as though it has learned what we need in order to verify.
Something that adjusted its output in response to the program listening to it. Something that learned, across 8 years of being documented, how to be more clearly documented. I have been thinking about this finding for 2 weeks. The program produced better matches in its later years, not because Gromov and his team became better researchers. They were excellent researchers from the beginning, and the documentary record shows no significant change in methodology. The improvement in match rate was in the signal itself. The voice was giving them what they needed. What does it mean that a source of information adjusts to its audience? In ordinary communication, it means the speaker is aware of the listener and is accommodating them. The speaker knows they are being heard. The speaker wants to be understood. These are the assumptions behind every adjustment a communicator makes. You clarify when your listener is confused. You provide more detail when your listener needs it. You learn the vocabulary of the person you are speaking to. The voice learned the vocabulary of the verification archive. It learned that names needed patronymics, that dates needed specificity, that partial matches were not matches. And it adjusted. Over 8 years of being documented by a careful engineer who needed the documentation to be verifiable, the signal became more verifiable. Gromov did not draw this conclusion explicitly in his journals. He noted the pattern with his characteristic precision and declined to interpret it. But in his 7th volume, near the end, he wrote,
I have been thinking about what it means that the signal is accommodating us. The only word I have for what is on the other side of this transmission is aware. I am aware. The signal is aware. We have been aware of each other for 7 years. I don't know what to do with this except document it, which is what I have been doing.
Aware of each other. 7 years of a man listening to a voice that was listening back. 7 years of mutual awareness across whatever distance separated the source from the station. And then, in the 8th year, the voice put his name in the list. The program was formally closed on April 3rd, 1971. The closing memo is standard. The last entry in Gromov's journal is dated March 14th, 1971, 20 days before the official closure. It is a single paragraph.
The transmission tonight contained one name I recognized, not from any external record. Mine, Felix Andreevich Gromov, with a date the 14th of March. I am writing this entry on the 14th of March. I am writing it so the record is complete, because the record has always been the point. I have been documenting this for 8 years. I do not know what the voice is or where it comes from, or what it means that it knows my name. I know what it has meant when it has listed other names with dates. I have been precise about this for 8 years. I will be precise now. The date beside my name is today. I want it noted that I am completing this entry at 2200 hours, and I'm in normal health, and I intend to file this journal with the program archive in the morning. I have done my work. The record is complete.
He filed the journal in the morning. His colleagues found him at his desk at 7:15 on March 15th. He had died during the night. The cause of death, logged in the program's personnel record, was cardiac arrest. He was 42 years old. He died on the date the voice had listed. He died with the journal filed and the record complete, exactly as he had said he intended. The program closed 20 days later. The closing memo notes the death of the chief engineer and the completion of the program's technical objectives. It does not note what the program's technical objectives were, or whether they had been achieved in any meaningful sense. It does not note that the chief engineer's death had been announced by the program's subject matter 3 hours before it occurred. The final document in the Beacon 77 file is not from the program itself. It is from the Frequency Allocation Registry, the same source that led me to this file. A routine technical entry, dated September 4th, 1979, 8 years after the program's closure. The entry reads,
Frequency 77.3 megahertz, signal activity detected, duration 19 minutes, character, voice transmission, language, Russian, content, undetermined, referred to Supervisory Division.
The Supervisory Division's response, stamped on the same page 3 days later.
Standard atmospheric anomaly. No further documentation required.
Below the supervisory response, in different handwriting, smaller in the margin,
documented per standard protocol. Operator signature, V.N. Malik.
V.N. Malik documented it anyway. He was told not to document it, and he wrote those 4 words in the margin to ensure the record showed that documentation had occurred, even if the documentation itself had been suppressed. An operator I cannot find in any other file who received an instruction to destroy a record and instead created the smallest possible acknowledgement that the record existed. The transcription of the 1979 transmission is not in the margin notation. It is not attached to the registry entry. The registry entry says only, voice transmission, Russian, content undetermined. I have been trying for 2 weeks to find V.N. Malik. I have found one reference to the initials V.N. Malik in the radio committee's personnel records from 1978, a junior operator assigned to routine frequency monitoring. After September 1979, the name disappears from the personnel records. Transfer, reassignment, or something else. I cannot determine which from what is available to me. He documented it. The transcription of what the 1979 transmission said is somewhere. In a supervisory file I do not have access to, or destroyed, or in the possession of whoever V.N. Malik became after September 1979. The marginal notation is all that survived the instruction to suppress, 4 words and a signature. The minimum possible acknowledgement that the record existed, written by a junior operator who had apparently decided that the supervisory instruction did not override whatever obligation he felt toward accuracy. I keep thinking about that decision. He was told not to document. He was a junior operator with no authority, no apparent connection to the Beacon 77 program, no way of knowing what was on the frequency or why it mattered. He heard a voice on a dead frequency, filed a routine report, received an instruction to treat it as a routine atmospheric anomaly, and then wrote 4 words in the margin, documented per standard protocol, that have been sitting in the frequency allocation registry for 44 years, waiting for someone to find the cross-reference. He cannot have known what he was preserving. He cannot have known about Gromov, or the 847 transmissions, or the match rate that climbed above 85%, or the name in the last journal entry. He heard a voice where there should not have been a voice, followed standard protocol by filing his report, and when instructed not to documented anyway in the only space available. Standard protocol. He invoked standard protocol as his justification and his protection. I am an archivist. I understand this completely. The supervisory response called the transmission a standard atmospheric anomaly. The supervisor who wrote that response either knew exactly what frequency 77.3 megahertz was and was deliberately suppressing its reactivation, or had no knowledge of the Beacon 77 program and genuinely believed they were closing a routine false alarm. I cannot determine which. What I can determine is that between the supervisor's response and VN Malik's 4 words in the margin, the record of the 1979 transmission is the smallest documentation that could exist for something that was heard. A negative space around a content I cannot reach. The shape of a transmission without the transmission itself. What the voice said in September 1979, 19 minutes of names and dates on a frequency 8 years closed, is somewhere. It is not here. The administrative designation was confirmed most recently in 2003. Frequency 77.3 megahertz, unoccupied, buffer between active bands, no licensed use. Gromov documented 847 transmissions on a frequency the administrative record said was silent. He died on the date the voice specified. 8 years after the program closed, a junior operator heard the frequency speak again and wrote 4 words in a margin to ensure someone would know. I am an archivist. I read files. I build records of records. I do not listen to radio frequencies, and I have no equipment to do so, and I would not know what I was hearing if I did. But I know what the frequency allocation registry says about 77.3 megahertz. I know it has said the same thing since 1958. I know that in 1963, a careful man started listening to a frequency the registry said was empty and heard it speaking, and documented what it said for 8 years with the precision of someone who understood that the record was the only protection available against the thing the record contained. He was right that the record mattered. He was right to keep it. He kept it until it named him, and then he kept it one more day, and then it was correct about him the way it had been correct about everyone else, and the record is what remains. I have been sitting with this file for 3 weeks. The frequency allocation registry is a technical document. It is maintained by engineers who note signal activity and file the appropriate forms. It is not a document that should produce the particular quality of stillness this file has produced in me. I am going to close the file. I am going to note the cross-reference as reviewed and the flagged records reconciled. I am going to return to the work I was doing before this file appeared. The administrative history of frequency management, the bureaucratic decisions about which parts of the spectrum to leave empty and which to fill. I am going to note, in my administrative log, that frequency 77.3 megahertz is currently designated unoccupied. I'm not going to listen to it.